Marge stood at the door, watching her son wave from the other side of the glass. She'd knocked 3 times. Hard. Her breath fogged the window, but Stephen just raised a hand and turned away. They had left her. On Christmas night. Outside, the snow was falling faster, but her heart was already freezing over. With no coat, no purse, and no ride, she realized one thing. She was done waiting for them to notice her. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The restaurant glowed like a snow globe behind her, all candlelight flickers and polished silverware. Laughter from other tables floated past the polished windows, muffled by thick glass. Marge smiled faintly, cheeks still flushed from the bottle of wine Stephen had ordered without looking at prices, knowing she'd cover it. "Let me just grab the scarf from the car," she'd said, pressing her napkin down beside her untouched slice of flourless cake. "Back in a minute." Stephen hadn't looked up. Carla barely nodded, already scrolling. Emily gave a quick smirk, then returned to filming her dessert for whatever she posted to. The wind bit her face the second the restaurant door swung closed behind her. She tugged her coat tighter and hurried across the icy parking lot toward her old sedan, its windows already frosting over. She grabbed the scarf from the passenger seat, burgundy wool, handmade years ago by her late husband, and looped it around her neck with a sigh. Her fingers hesitated on the car door. Something felt off, like a page in her life had just turned without her knowing. When she made it back to the entrance, the glass doors stared blankly at her, locked. She blinked and pulled the handle. It didn't budge. Her eyes darted to the small brass sign beside the door. Closed. Happy holidays. What? It couldn't be past closing time already. She hadn't been gone more than 3 minutes. Marge rapped gently on the glass with her knuckles. No response. Inside, through the filtered warmth of chandeliers and garland-wrapped banisters, she saw them. Stephen and Carla were still seated at the table, now sipping coffee. Emily was scrolling again. She knocked louder. Stephen looked over. He saw her. He actually saw her. And he raised one hand in a vague, slow-motion wave. Beside him, Carla smiled, tight-lipped, almost embarrassed, and gave a dismissive little shrug. Emily didn't even look. Marge's hand fell to her side. She waited. Maybe they were joking. Maybe someone was getting up to let her back in. Any second now. No one moved. She stepped closer to the door, now thudding her palm against it. Then her knuckles again. Harder this time. Her breath fogged up the glass, creating a halo around her face. She wiped it with the edge of her coat sleeve, half hoping it would somehow wipe away whatever this moment was turning into. Still nothing. A waiter passed behind them, flipping chairs onto tables. One of the hostesses slipped into a coat and walked toward the back. No one spared her a second glance. Her chest tightened. She pounded on the door now, 3 sharp knocks that echoed against the street, but the lights inside began dimming, one by one. Stephen reached for his coat. Carla dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. Emily laughed at something on her phone. Not one of them looked her way again. Snowflakes began drifting from the sky, soft at first, then faster, clinging to her gray hair and lashes. The cold crept into her boots and settled in her toes like a slow burn. She stepped back onto the sidewalk, the restaurant fading into a glowing tableau behind her. Her scarf whipped in the wind. Her breath came in short, stunned clouds. She was outside, on Christmas night, and they had left her there. Lights in nearby shops were going dark, one after another. A man in a beanie pulled his kid along the sidewalk, laughing as the boy kicked snow into the air. A couple clinked coffee cups in a cozy cafe across the street. Marge stood in the middle of it all, silent, invisible. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, one new text from Carla. She didn't look at it. Instead, she turned slowly toward the harbor, where distant lights shimmered on the icy water, and started walking. The sidewalk had iced over, but Marge didn't stop walking. Her boots slid a little with each step, the cold biting harder now, curling around her legs and stinging her cheeks. She kept her eyes on the blurry amber lights in the distance, the ones twinkling by the harbor like an invitation. The snow muted the city's usual hum. No honks, no chatter, just the steady crunch of her steps and the wind sighing through bare branches overhead. Her breath came out in sharp, visible bursts. She tugged the scarf tighter, grateful for the wool against her throat, one foot in front of the other. She passed storefronts shuttered for the holiday, darkened boutiques, a florist with wilting wreaths in the window, and a diner closed early with a handwritten sign taped inside the glass. "Merry Christmas. See you tomorrow." She didn't stop to rest, not even when a deep ache settled in her knees, not even when her phone buzzed again. Finally, at the end of a gently sloping street near the harbor, she saw it, a 3-story inn tucked between a lighthouse-shaped coffee shop and a row of cottages. Warm light spilled from its frosted windows, golden wreaths hung on each pane, a wooden sign swung lightly above the entrance, illuminated by a wrought iron lantern, the Osprey Harbor Inn. Marge hesitated only a moment, then she climbed the steps and pushed the door open. Warmth hit her like a memory, roaring fireplace, the faint scent of cinnamon and pine, a jazz record playing somewhere in the distance. It was like walking into the pages of a Christmas card she didn't know she needed. "Hello?" she called softly, her voice still brittle from the cold. A woman emerged from behind the check-in counter, wiping her hands on a plaid dish towel. She looked to be in her early 40s, short dark curls and calm eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses. She wore jeans and a deep green sweater, no name tag, just comfort, like someone who didn't have to prove she belonged in her own space. "Evening," the woman said, voice gentle but clear. "You okay out there?" Marge hesitated, then in one breath, "I was supposed to have dinner with my son. I stepped out to the car, and when I came back, the restaurant was closed. They didn't let me back in." The woman didn't blink, didn't ask for more. Instead, she nodded once and came around the counter. "I'm Ivy Collins. This is my inn. We've got one room left tonight, small but cozy. If you want it, it's yours." Marge blinked. Thank you, but I didn't bring my purse, just my phone and keys." "I didn't ask for a credit card," Ivy said gently. "We can figure that out later. Come sit by the fire. You're shaking." Only then did Marge realize how cold she truly was. Her fingers were stiff, her boots soaked through. Her body had been in motion so long she hadn't let herself feel it. Ivy guided her to a tufted armchair by the fire and brought her a thick blanket. Then she disappeared briefly and returned with a cup of something warm. "Spiced cider. Made it this morning." Marge wrapped her hands around the mug. The heat made her fingertips tingle. She sipped and closed her eyes. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then her phone buzzed again in her pocket. She pulled it out, ready to silence it. But it wasn't Stephen or Carla. Joanne Parker. Marge answered. "Are you kidding me?" Joanne's voice cracked like a match through the receiver. "They left you out in the cold? On Christmas? Marjorie, where are you?" "At a little inn," Marge said quietly, eyes drifting to the fire. "Near the harbor. Someone kind found me. Text me the address. I'm coming tomorrow." Marge smiled, soft and tired. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do, and we're not letting this slide." By the time Ivy showed her to a second-floor room, Marge could barely keep her eyes open. The space was small, yes, but lovely. A pine-scented candle flickered on the dresser. A quilted comforter covered the bed. A window overlooked the harbor where strings of lights flickered along the boardwalk, reflected in still water. Marge sat on the edge of the bed, then lay back slowly, the blanket cocooning her in a warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. She didn't cry. She didn't fume. She stared at the ceiling, heart steady, breath calm, and whispered, "No more." Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor in soft, honey-colored stripes. Marge blinked awake slowly, the faint scent of pine and pastry already floating through the room. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, painted a calming sea-glass blue, with faint brushstrokes that gave it a hand-touched look. The harbor lights from the night before had gone out. Now, just beyond the frost-laced window, fishing boats bobbed in the gray morning water, the docks dusted in snow. Her phone buzzed again from the bedside table. She didn't move. It buzzed a second time, insistent, mechanical. Marge rolled over and stared at the screen without touching it. Carla. Again. A full preview lit up. "We need to clear the air. Please call when you're ready." She locked the phone without replying, then placed it face down. Downstairs, the scent of something warm and buttery lured her from under the covers. In the inn's dining nook, walls draped in garland, soft Ella Fitzgerald playing low, Marge found Ivy laying out breakfast. Flaky croissants, cinnamon knots, and a dish of cranberry preserves sat beside a pot of fresh coffee and a carafe of orange juice. A cluster of poinsettias bloomed at the edge of the counter. Everything looked like it had been arranged with quiet love, not for show, but for care. "Sleep okay?" Ivy asked, glancing up from where she was slicing an apple tart. "Better than I have in a long time," Marge said, easing into a high-backed chair near the window. The harbor view was soft with mist, a few gulls circling like they were in no rush either. Ivy poured her coffee, then placed a small linen-bound notebook beside the plate. "Thought you might want to put some of it down," she said. Marge looked at the notebook. Its cover was simple, just cream and cloth, no logo or lines, blank and waiting. She picked it up, thumbed the edge, and something in her chest caught. Not pain, not even anger, just a pause, a space where something else might grow. "Thank you," she murmured. Ivy smiled and moved on without a word. Marge began to write. She didn't try to summarize. No big explanation, just pieces. December 26th. I paid. I walked out. They let the door close. They saw me standing there. They chose not to move. The pen glided easier after that. Her words steadied as her coffee cooled. The pastry flaked sweetly in her mouth. The world outside the window turned a few quiet degrees. Just after 10, the inn door flew open. "Marge?" Joanne Parker burst into the lobby like a storm in leopard print boots and a wool coat that looked ready to fight someone. Her cheeks were wind-kissed, and her silver blonde hair frizzed under her knit cap. In her gloved hands, she held a thermos and a newspaper folded in half, like she had wrestled both away from some poor man she'd yelled at. Marge stood up slowly. Joanne strode across the room and wrapped her in a hug so firm it made her spine crack. "They left you? Like a stray cat? After you paid?" Her voice rang out, no interest in being quiet. "That boy's got rocks where his soul used to be." "I'm okay," Marge said softly, pulling back. "I landed in a good place." Joanne looked around. "No kidding. This place smells like Christmas cookies and emotional healing." Ivy appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands. "You must be Joanne." Joanne turned. "And you must be the angel in flannel who didn't slam a door in her face." Ivy grinned. "Welcome to the inn." Marge stepped back, letting the two women exchange greetings, but her fingers rested on the edge of the table, grounding herself. It had all moved so fast. One night, one door closed, and yet here she stood, solid. Joanne circled back. "You know what's funny?" she said. "I always thought the worst thing Stephen could do was forget your birthday. But this is cruelty, plain and simple, and I'm not gonna sit still for it." Marge didn't argue. She looked out the window again, watching a small boy trail after his father on the dock below. The child kicked slush into the air like it was something magical. Then she turned to Joanne. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. "I think I've had enough," she said, "of being left out." The heater clicked softly beneath Marge's seat, but her hands still clutched the paper folder like it might slip away if she let go. Outside, sleet tapped against the windows of the law office, a rhythm both patient and unrelenting. The kind of weather that forced the world into stillness. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather-bound books and strong coffee. Thomas Grant's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same green banker's lamp, same heavy oak desk, same bowl of individually wrapped butterscotch candies that no one ever took except Joanne. He hadn't changed much either. His salt and pepper hair was thinner now, his glasses thicker, but his voice was still clipped and deliberate, like each word was a contract in itself. He reviewed the last of her documents in silence. Marge watched him over the rim of her coffee mug, her thumb rubbing the edge of her folded restaurant receipt. The total, $468.52 before tip, glared up at her like a reminder of how much she'd given and how little it meant. Finally, Thomas set the receipt aside and folded his hands. "They didn't let you back in," he said flatly. "No," she said. They didn't. And they saw you standing there? Marge nodded. Stephen looked right at me. Carla, too. Emily didn't even try. He didn't ask why. That was the thing about Thomas. He never wasted time trying to rationalize other people's cruelty, just tallied the damage and got to work. I'd like to make changes to the will, she said. Immediate changes. Understood? He opened a fresh folder from the drawer, retrieved a template document, and clicked a pen open. The sound echoed like a gavel. Do you want to leave them anything? He asked. No, Marge said quietly. Not even a warning. Thomas didn't blink. Then we'll start from scratch. Marge passed over the receipts, the dinner reservation confirmation, and a printed copy of the last few text messages, not the ones she had ignored, but the ones where Carla had started shifting blame, asking to clear the air and not let things get blown out of proportion. They're already trying to spin it, she murmured. They always do, Joanne muttered from the corner chair, arms crossed, legs kicked out like she was waiting for a boxing bell. Thomas made notes in the margin, each stroke confident. You'll need a witness, he said. Joanne stood before he'd even finished the sentence. That would be me. Gladly. Thomas smiled faintly, but his tone stayed all business. You'll also want to specify where you do want your estate to go. Do you have alternatives in mind? Marge hesitated only a moment. The Harbor Inn, she said. And Joanne. Joanne raised her brows but said nothing, only reached out to squeeze Marge's hand. I want to support places where kindness still exists, Marge added. Ivy gave me a room without asking for a credit card. Joanne drove 2 hours on icy roads without waiting for permission. That deserves something. Thomas nodded. Noted. The pen flew across the pages again, elegant and purposeful. There was something deeply satisfying in watching it happen. Like watching someone dismantle a rotting house beam by beam, clearing the way for something better. The law office had always felt too cold to her before. Now it felt like the first space where she could actually do something, where her voice didn't disappear into wallpaper and polite nods, where consequences didn't float away like snowflakes. Thomas handed her the draft packet. We'll finalize next week, but this gets the ball rolling. You'll sign after review. Marge held the papers like they were made of something heavier than paper. It wasn't just the ink, the wording, the legal formality. It was the shift. A recalibration of where she stood in her own story. I thought I'd feel sad, she said, cutting them out, but I don't. You shouldn't, Joanne said. This isn't punishment. It's freedom. Outside, the sleet had turned to snow again, thick and silent, the world wrapped in a new layer, waiting. Thomas stood. You've got witnesses, you've got motive, and you've got the law on your side. Marge rose too, her spine straightening like something inside her had been restrung. She looked out the window for a long moment. Then she turned back and said, Let's finish what they started. The pen was heavier than it looked. Brass, well-weighted, smooth in her hand. Marge adjusted her grip and drew in a breath so quiet it barely stirred the air. Then she signed. One page, then another, then the last. Thomas placed a small adhesive flag beside each line like a conductor leading a quiet symphony. When it was done, he gathered the stack with calm precision, tapping the pages into a perfect edge before sliding them into a folder marked with her name. It's official, he said. They're out. The trust is amended, the will is updated, and your assets are protected under the revised directives. No loopholes. He looked her straight in the eyes, his voice steady. This version will hold. Marge nodded, slow and sure, as if she were relearning how to agree with herself. Joanne let out a low whistle. That's what I call a clean break. Outside the office, the sun had managed to carve through the clouds, casting patches of gold on the wet pavement. A light breeze rustled the edge of Marge's coat as she stepped out, folder clutched under one arm like a shield she'd earned. It was done. Stephen, Carla, Emily, they'd find out eventually. Not from her. Not yet. But the door had closed. This time she'd locked it from her side. The local bakery was only a few blocks away, and when Joanne suggested stopping in, Marge surprised herself by saying yes. Inside, the scent of fresh bread, orange peel, and roasted espresso wrapped around her like a second coat. The place bustled with post-holiday energy, young couples in puffy jackets, a pair of high school girls splitting a muffin, a barista who hummed while steaming milk. They found a corner booth beside the window, a pot of coffee between them and two mismatched mugs, one with faded holly leaves, the other with a cartoon reindeer missing an eye. Joanne raised her cup. To new chapters and well-placed middle fingers. Marge smirked and clinked her mug softly against Joanne's. "For the first time," she said, "I don't feel guilty." "You shouldn't. You gave them chances they didn't earn over and over again. All you're doing now is closing the books they kept writing you out of." Marge nodded. She sipped her coffee. It was strong and sweet and grounding. Her phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up. Carla, one new message. She didn't need to open it. The preview was enough. "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." Marge locked the phone and slid it back into her purse. "I used to scramble every time they said that," she murmured. "I'd rearrange my schedule, apologize for things I hadn't done, send gift cards just to smooth things over." "Not anymore," Joanne said. "No," Marge agreed. "Not anymore." They sat for a while, watching the world pass outside. A golden retriever padded past with snow on its snout. A young father held a coffee in one hand and a child's mittened hand in the other. A car honked at nothing in particular. Then the bakery door opened. Ivy walked in. She spotted them instantly and came over, cheeks pink from the cold, a knit scarf wrapped twice around her neck. "I'm not interrupting, am I?" she asked, sliding off her gloves. "Never," Joanne said. Marge smiled. "What brings you here?" "I had a delivery next door, but actually I wanted to ask something." Ivy paused, glanced between them, then continued. "New Year's Eve is coming up. We're hosting a community dinner at the inn, usually small, just neighbors, shop owners, a few regular guests. But this year I want it to be something different." "Different how?" Marge asked. "I'd like to do it for you," Ivy said. "In your name. You've given us a lot more than you know, and people need to feel that kindness still matters." Marge blinked. "You want to host a dinner? For me?" "Yes," Ivy said, unwavering. "You've spent enough holidays making other people feel welcome. Let's turn the tables." The inn smelled like oranges and pine, and something buttery baking in the kitchen. Marge stood at the front parlor window with a guest list in one hand and a pencil in the other, watching snow tick down like confetti. Ivy had pulled out boxes of twinkle lights, napkin rings shaped like snowflakes, and a serving tray that played music when you set it down. Slightly obnoxious, but oddly charming. Joanne circled the coffee table like a coach assembling a roster. "All right," she said, tapping her pen on her notepad. "We're not inviting anyone who's ever made you feel small. That cuts the list down fast." Marge laughed under her breath. "Well, there goes half of my holiday address book." "Perfect. That leaves room for people who deserve a seat." They landed on a crowd of 23. Ivy would handle catering. Joanne would handle music. Something jazzy, nothing sentimental. Marge would help with decor and table settings. It came together in quick harmony, like the universe had been waiting for them to make this move. By New Year's Eve, the inn had transformed. Wreaths wrapped in golden ribbon framed every doorway. The fireplace glowed steadily. Tables were pushed together in the main hall, covered in ivory linen and scattered with handmade place cards Marge had written herself. A string quartet of local students played softly in the corner while candles flickered in glass jars. Outside, a fresh dusting of snow coated the harbor walk. Inside, the air buzzed. Neighbors arrived with wine and wrapped trays. The bakery sent over cranberry shortbread and chocolate orange tartlets. A retired schoolteacher brought deviled eggs and a 3-layer cake. A woman from the senior center wore a vintage fur stole and cried when she saw Marge across the room. "You made it feel like a real holiday again," she whispered. Marge didn't know what to say, so she took her hand instead and gave it a gentle squeeze. By the time the clock struck 8, the room was full of laughter and movement. Glasses clinked. Music swelled. A teenage boy spun his grandmother around the floor near the fireplace, both of them grinning like children. Ivy bustled back and forth from the kitchen, her cheeks flushed, a red apron tied over her black dress. Joanne grabbed the mic from the quartet during a brief pause in the set. "Before we dive into dessert," she said, I just want to thank the reason we're all here tonight, Marge Bennett. If you've ever had a cup of coffee she paid for without knowing it, if you've ever been on the receiving end of one of her famous thank you notes, or if, like me, you've ever been pulled back from the edge by her stubborn kindness, raise your glass." Every hand lifted. Marge blinked, surprised to feel tears pressing at the edges of her vision, not sharp, just soft, like steam rising from a warm mug. "To kindness," someone said. "To second chances," said another. "To Marge," the room echoed. She sat back in her chair, breath full, heart quiet. And then Ivy appeared beside her with a carefully wrapped box. "Just something small," she said. Inside was a framed photograph, sepia-toned, moody and warm. It showed the harbor at sunrise, fog drifting across the water, the inn glowing softly in the background. But at the center was Marge herself, wrapped in her coat, standing on the steps of the inn the morning after Christmas, looking not lost, but anchored. "I didn't know you took this," Marge whispered. "I didn't either," Ivy said. "A guest captured it, sent it to me yesterday." Marge touched the glass. "It feels like the beginning of something." "It is," Ivy said. The back door swung open and a gust of cold air swept through the entry hall. Ivy went to close it, but paused. Through the window, headlights flared. A sleek black SUV idled across the street, engine running, windows up. Inside it, behind the glass, Marge caught a flicker of blonde hair, Carla, watching the inn with a tight, unreadable expression. Then the brake lights flashed red, and the SUV pulled away, disappearing into the dark. The inn was still. 2 nights after the dinner, the warmth lingered, not just in the wood beams or the thick rugs underfoot, but in the air itself. It was the kind of quiet that didn't ache, just hummed low in your bones like a song you didn't know you needed to remember. Marge sat in the parlor wrapped in her favorite shawl, the one with the soft fringe she always meant to fix but never had to, because it only ever touched the skin of people who truly cared for her. A cup of Earl Grey rested on the arm of her chair, untouched. The fire cracked in the hearth. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't reach for it, she didn't even look, but the screen caught the firelight anyway. One voicemail, Stephen. Joanne, curled sideways in the next chair with a crossword in her lap, peered over her glasses. "If that's another apology covered in barbed wire, you can go ahead and delete it." Marge didn't smile. Not quite, but something eased in her shoulders. "He said it's all a misunderstanding," she said softly. "That I left too fast, that they didn't realize I'd stepped outside." Joanne scoffed. "He saw you standing there, Marge. You told me that. You know he did." "I do," Marge said. "Then don't let them bend the memory just because they're uncomfortable with the truth." The fire popped. Marge looked toward it, the flames folding in on themselves like dancers in the final beat of a waltz. She finally silenced the phone and turned it face down on the table. Later that afternoon, Thomas called. "Just double-checking," he said. "You're still set on the disinheritance language? No percentage allocation, no fallback clause." "I'm set," Marge replied, calm as glass. "It's not about punishing them. I just won't be written out of my own life anymore." "You're fully protected," he confirmed. "Their names are nowhere. The only thing they'll get from your estate is a formal notification from my office when the time comes." "Perfect," Marge said. "And Marjorie?" he added. "I'm proud of you. Most people wait until they're too tired or too afraid to act. You did it while you're still very much alive." That made her smile. After dinner, Ivy invited her for a walk around the inn. No snowstorm this time, just the kind of evening chill that reminded you to breathe deeply. They moved slowly past the windows, some still lit with faint Christmas decor. Inside, guests curled up with books and cocoa and card games. At the back door, Ivy turned to her. "You know something? You're the kind of guest I always hoped this place would be for." "I wasn't a guest," Marge said. "I was a woman with nowhere else to go." "That's exactly who this place was built for," Ivy said. "And now it's yours too, as long as you want it." Marge exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. They stood in silence for a moment longer before Ivy stepped back inside, leaving Marge alone with the stars, the hush of the harbor, and the warmth that had followed her out the door. Later, in her room, wrapped in a thick robe and settled into the armchair by the window, she let herself scroll. Not messages, not voicemail, just a quick check of Facebook, more habit than curiosity. And there it was. A post from Carla. Public. Funny how some people rewrite the past to play victim. Must be nice to be a selfish elder with no accountability and a fat bank account. But hey, karma's real. Hey. No names, no tags. But everyone would know. Marge stared at it for a long time. She didn't comment, didn't message, didn't screen capture it for Thomas. She just smiled, small but genuine, because for the first time their shame didn't belong to her. Joanne arrived the next morning, coat unzipped and cheeks red from wind, phone in one hand and fury in the other. She posted again, she announced, before even stepping fully into the parlor. And this time, there's no way to pretend it wasn't about you. Marge looked up from her tea, already bracing herself. She hasn't tagged me, she said, voice calm. Joanne tossed her phone onto the coffee table. Because she knows better. But come on. The kind of person who can smile while ruining her family's future. That's surgical. That's aimed. Marge picked up the phone and scrolled through the screen. The post was there. New, fresh, public. Hard to watch someone smile through betrayal. But I guess some people only feel powerful when they're erasing what made them. The comments were a mix. Vague support. Some silence. One or two relatives liking it without commenting. Familiar names Marge hadn't seen at Christmas in years. Nobody defended her. Nobody questioned the story. She handed the phone back. Send it to Thomas. If he thinks it's worth documenting, he'll know what to do with it. Joanne's eyebrows lifted. That's it? That's all you want to do? Yes, Marge said, because she wasn't trying to fight Carla. She was documenting. Later that day, Thomas called with the usual crisp tone. Got the screenshots, he confirmed. I'm adding them to your estate file. You've handled this well. It's not about revenge, Marge said. I know, he replied, but it's also not about pretending people didn't show you who they are. That file exists to protect your truth. She thanked him and hung up. Stillness again. But not emptiness. Ivy knocked gently on the frame of the open door. You want to get out of here for a while? Marge looked up. Out? There's a seniors' winter social at the rec center, Ivy said. They do hot cider, bingo, and some weird but oddly fun line dancing thing. I go every January, just to chaperone the chaos. Marge hesitated. She had grown used to the soft rhythm of the inn. The firelight, the layered silences, the absence of obligation, but Ivy's gaze was light and steady, an offer, not a push. All right, Marge said, standing slowly. Let's see if I still remember how to talk to strangers. The center was bright and bustling. A pop-up band played in one corner, clarinet, accordion, tambourine, and someone had tacked mistletoe over the door even though the holiday had passed. The space smelled like cinnamon and cafeteria coffee, coats piled on folding chairs. Someone's cane jingled with a string of bells. Marge accepted cider in a styrofoam cup, smiled at a woman in a red cardigan who complimented her scarf, listened as a retired firefighter told a story about how he once accidentally proposed to the wrong woman, twice, and before she even realized it, she was laughing. Not just the polite kind, real laughter, deep, sharp, unapologetic. She danced once, sat out the next 3, won a small jar of homemade jam during trivia, lost spectacularly at bingo. By the time she returned to the inn, her cheeks hurt from smiling. She sat by the window in the parlor again that evening, wrapped in her shawl, not out of weariness but comfort. She wrote in her linen notebook just a few words. My body's tired, my soul's stretching. Then her phone buzzed. One new text. Stephen. She hesitated, then read it. We're family. That means we fix things. Call me before it's too late. No apology, no acknowledgement, just demand dressed in nostalgia. She didn't respond. Instead, she looked up. Ivy had just returned from the kitchen with a dish towel slung over her shoulder and a tray of cookies balanced in one hand. Do I have time to ask a weird question? Marge asked. You always do. Marge smiled. How do you know when you've stopped needing someone's approval? Ivy set the tray down carefully. When their disappointment stops feeling like proof that you failed. Marge exhaled, a quiet release she hadn't known she was holding. The bell over the inn's front door jingled harder than usual, almost like it had been yanked, not nudged. Ivy looked up from behind the front desk with a practiced, welcome smile already halfway in place. But it faded when she saw who stood in the doorway. Emily Bennett. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid, her makeup heavy around the eyes, more adult than Marge remembered. She wore an oversized faux fur coat that didn't match the weather and boots that had clearly never met real snow. Behind her, the wind blew hard against the door she'd failed to shut properly. "I'm here to see my grandmother," she said, voice too loud, too casual, like she was announcing herself at a dinner party. Marge, seated in the armchair closest to the fire, heard her voice before she saw her face. She didn't move, didn't rise. She simply looked across the lobby as Emily stepped forward, boots squeaking on the polished hardwood. I think we should talk," Emily said, tone suddenly softer. "It's gone too far, don't you think? Cutting us off, changing everything without even telling us?" Marge blinked. "Did your parents send you?" Emily's lips pressed together. "No." Marge waited. Emily hesitated just long enough to make the lie obvious. "They don't know I'm here." Joanne, sitting nearby with a half-finished crossword, muttered under her breath, "And the Oscar goes to—" Marge kept her voice gentle. "Why now, Emily?" "I mean, we're family. That still means something, right?" Her eyes sparkled, but not with emotion, with calculation. "Look, I get it. Christmas was weird. But honestly, you kind of overreacted." Ivy had stepped around the counter by now, arms loosely folded, expression unreadable. "You stood there," Marge said evenly. "You watched me knock on the glass, and you laughed." Emily blinked. "I was, trying to make light of it. That's what we do. We laugh things off in our family." "Not anymore," Marge replied. Emily huffed. "So that's it? You're just going to throw away everything over one misunderstanding?" "Is that what they told you?" Marge asked. "That it was a misunderstanding?" "I'm 17, Emily said, like it was an excuse and an accusation at once. Marge nodded. "Then you're old enough to recognize cruelty, and to decide whether you repeat it." The silence between them stretched thin. Then Emily rolled her eyes. "Whatever," she said. "You're clearly loving all this attention." That's when Ivy stepped forward. "I think it's time you left," she said, voice calm but crisp. "This isn't a drive-by guilt trip location. This is Marge's home." Emily hesitated, just long enough to make it clear she hadn't expected to be challenged. She turned back to Marge, lips parted, but Marge had already turned her gaze to the fire. Ivy walked her to the door. Emily muttered something under her breath as she stepped outside into the wind. The door clicked shut behind her. The snow had started coming down hard, thick sideways flakes that blurred the harbor view. The windows frosted at the edges as if trying to seal the warmth inside. The storm had rolled in fast, coiling around the inn like a warning. Joanne leaned over, patting Marge's hand. "They're desperate now. When manipulation stops working, they try charm. When that fails, they start sending in the kids." Marge didn't answer right away. She was staring into the fire, as if watching something she'd finally let burn. Thomas called just after dusk, his tone steady. "Got wind of the visit," he said. "Don't worry. Nothing about your estate can be challenged. We're fully insulated, Marjorie. Let them rage. It won't touch you." "Thank you," she said. "I'm not angry anymore. Just clean." That night, Ivy brought a tray with 2 mugs of cinnamon cocoa and sat across from Marge by the fire. A second log crackled as it caught flame. Ivy leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So there's something I want to run by you." Marge raised an eyebrow. "Should I be nervous?" Number hopefully touched. Ivy pulled a small folder from behind the tray and slid it across the coffee table. Inside was a mock-up design, gold lettering on deep green paper. The Bennett Suite, a space for peace, dignity, and quiet return. Marge looked up, startled. "You're naming a room after me?" "I'm naming your room after you," Ivy said. "You turned this place into something more than I ever imagined. I want guests to feel that long after you've checked out, for the night or for good." 3 days after the storm, The inn was blanketed in a peaceful kind of white, the kind that looked painted on, not dumped. Fresh snow coated the roof in clean curves, icicles hanging like ornaments from the eaves. The sky had cleared to a soft winter blue, and the harbor was calm, save for the occasional gull cutting through the quiet. Inside the inn's lobby, Ivy stood beside a framed brass plaque mounted just outside room 203. She adjusted it once, stepped back, then looked at Marge. "Well?" she asked. "Too much? Not enough?" Marge stepped closer. The Bennett Suite, in honor of Grace Under Fire and the quiet power of choosing peace. Her throat tightened, but she didn't speak. Joanne didn't wait for permission. She wrapped both arms around Marge from the side, catching her in one of those hugs that didn't ask. It declared, "You realize this makes you basically royalty now, right?" Joanne said into her ear. Marge finally laughed, a warm, tired sound. Reporters from the local paper showed up an hour later, just two of them. A young photographer with wind-tousled hair and a notepad tucked behind one ear, and a journalist in her 50s who seemed more interested in the cinnamon scones than the actual interview. Still, the questions were kind. What inspired the donation? Why this inn? What do you hope people feel when they stay in your suite? Marge answered thoughtfully without bitterness. "I hope they feel seen, and I hope they realize it's never too late to change the story you're in." Ivy stood off to the side, quietly watching, her hand resting on the edge of the reception desk like she was anchoring the moment. After the questions, they asked for a photo. "Mind if we take it outside?" the photographer asked. "Just under the holiday lights by the steps?" Marge nodded. "Sure." The cold didn't bite quite so hard that afternoon. She stood wrapped in her burgundy scarf beneath strings of soft yellow lights. Behind her, the inn glowed gold. She smiled, not wide or forced, just full, whole. Click. The camera captured it in one frame, the calm of someone no longer waiting for permission to exist. The article went live later that evening. Ivy showed her on her phone while they were in the kitchen folding napkins for that weekend's brunch crowd. The headline was "Gentle Local Woman Leaves Legacy of Warmth at Harbor Inn." Joanne printed 3 copies and taped one to the fridge at the senior center before Marge could object, but not everyone read it with soft eyes. Her phone buzzed at 9:12 p.m. "Carla," one new message. She didn't open it, just sat at the window and watched the harbor. Then, curiosity got the better of her. "Unbelievable. Public recognition now? You're really this petty? Whatever helps you sleep at night." No greeting, no punctuation besides the question mark. No room for anything but spite dressed up as wounded pride. Marge held the phone in her hand for a long moment. Then, slowly and deliberately, she pressed her finger to the screen and slid the message into the trash. Not archived, deleted. She opened the linen notebook on her lap and wrote only one line. When peace finally came, it looked nothing like surrender. Downstairs, laughter echoed from the parlor, Joanne beating someone at gin rummy. Ivy humming as she folded tablecloths, a couple checking in, dragging suitcases behind them across the tile. The inn had become a kind of heartbeat, quiet but steady, and Marge no longer felt like a guest inside it. The will was one thing. The donation was something else entirely. By mid-January, the frost hadn't lifted from the sidewalks, but Marge's mind felt clearer than it had in years. No heaviness in her limbs when she rose in the morning, no dread in her throat every time her phone lit up, no preoccupied spiraling over whether a text had sounded too cold or not kind enough. Instead, she rode with Joanne to Thomas's office with 2 extra copies of the plaque photo folded into her purse, her scarf looped neatly at her neck. Thomas greeted them with a rare smile, motioning them into the conference room, smaller than his main office but warmer somehow, with a single oil painting of a lighthouse and a stack of fresh yellow legal pads at the center of the table. "It's all prepared," he said. "Just a few signatures and initials. Then it's real." Marge sat down, smoothing the front of her sweater. "It already feels real." Joanne sat beside her and uncapped the pen with theatrical flair. "Let's do this." The documents were thick, stapled, tabbed in color-coded sections. The donation would be locked into the Living Trust, a formal bequest of both funds and assets directed to the Osprey Harbor Inn's community program. Ivy's vision of outreach, off-season rooms for seniors in crisis, veterans passing through town, local women rebuilding after domestic loss, would now be possible long after Marge was gone. Joanne watched her sign with pride but no pity. "This is better than a bench in a park," she said. "No pigeons involved." Marge smiled. "Or gum stuck to your legacy." Thomas notarized the signatures one by one. "The suite naming will also be recorded as part of the formal endowment language," he added. "It protects the designation from being altered after the fact." Marge nodded. That mattered more than she thought it would. Joanne signed the final witness page and leaned back with a sigh. "I should have worn pearls. This feels historic." Outside, snow began falling again, light, fluttering, almost decorative. By the time they returned to the inn, a flower arrangement waited on the front desk. White tulips, silver eucalyptus, a single deep violet calla lily in the center. A folded note sat beside it in Ivy's neat handwriting. "For the woman who made Sanctuary feel possible, thank you for everything." Marge blinked once, then twice. No one had ever thanked her like that before. That night, Ivy insisted on making dinner, something hearty and comforting: chicken pot pie, a salad with toasted pecans, honey cornbread warm from the oven. They ate in the kitchen with music playing low and steam curling from mugs of cider. Marge felt the quiet stretch around her, not hollow but solid, like something that could hold her weight. Later, she curled up by the fireplace, notebook in her lap, half listening to the crackle of wood and the muffled rhythm of sleet beginning to tap at the windows again. Her phone buzzed on the table, then buzzed again and again. She didn't have to check to know who it was. Stephen. No texts this time, just calls. One after another, a slow, methodical persistence, as if ringing long enough might break through some imagined wall. Joanne looked up from her corner seat. That man could sell ice to a glacier if he thought it would buy him forgiveness. "I don't owe him anything," Marge said, more to herself than anyone else. She picked up the phone, hovered for a moment, then slid her finger across the screen and tapped "Do Not Disturb." The phone fell silent in her hand, like it had exhaled too. She placed it face down beside her notebook and took a long sip of cider. Then she wrote, "The door stayed closed this time, but not because it was locked. Because I finally didn't answer." She closed the notebook, leaned back in her chair, and let the fire warm her from the feet up. The fire was already going when Joanne slid her phone across the coffee table. "I wasn't going to show you," she said, "but it's starting to circulate and I figured you'd rather see it on your terms." Marge looked down at the screen, a paused video. The thumbnail showed Emily standing in front of a bookshelf backdrop, her makeup soft, hair loose, her usual sharpness dulled into something more curated. The caption read, "Clearing the air, my side of the holiday story." Marge didn't press play right away. Instead, she picked up her mug of tea, took a slow sip, and asked quietly, "How long?" Joanne shrugged. "Posted this morning. It's got a few thousand views already. Shared by a couple mutual friends. One of Stephen's co-workers commented with a clapping emoji." Marge gave a dry little exhale. "Of course he did." Joanne said nothing, just waited. Marge tapped the screen. The video began with a long, rehearsed breath. Emily sat with her hands folded in her lap like a news anchor gearing up to report her own damage control. "I want to talk about something really personal today," she began, her voice warm but off-key. "Some things happened over the holidays that were misunderstood, and unfortunately, people I love have been hurt. That was never the intention." She went on. Careful phrasing. Polished pauses. Words like miscommunication, emotional complexity, and respect for privacy. No mention of a door left locked, no acknowledgement of cold, or glass, or silence, just tone and tactic. The comments scrolled beneath her face. "Sounds like someone got written out of a will." "Where's the apology, though? Say her name, or this means nothing." "We're tired of fake forgiveness videos. Her grandma deserves better." Marge clicked it off before it ended. She set the phone down, slow and deliberate, like it might still be hot. "Well," she said, "at least she didn't cry on camera." Joanne raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Marge replied. It's just too little and far too late. She leaned back into the cushions and stared at the fire, which had started to settle into a deeper orange. She doesn't know how to apologize, Marge added after a moment. She knows how to perform. She learned from the best, Joanne said dryly. That whole house should have been zoned for emotional gaslighting. They sat in companionable quiet, the kind you didn't need to fill. Eventually, Ivy appeared at the parlor doorway, scarf in hand, cheeks pink from being outside. "Harbor's calm today," she said. "Want to walk it off with me?" Marge looked up, then nodded. "Yes, I think I would." They stepped outside together, the door clicking shut behind them. The air was cool and briny, not biting, just crisp. Gulls circled low above the dock, and somewhere in the distance, a bell buoy rang once like a soft memory. They didn't speak much, just walked. Ivy let Marge set the pace, slow but steady, and the boards of the harbor path creaked softly beneath their boots. Here, among the salted wind and smell of seaweed and wood smoke, Marge felt something shift, not a break, not a wound, a release. She stopped near the far end of the dock, where the view opened wide to the Atlantic, and leaned her hands on the railing. "You know," she said, "they spent so much time trying to shape the story, change the lens, reframe the picture." "They still are," Ivy replied. Marge nodded. "But I finally stopped needing to be in their photo." The wind caught her scarf, tugging it lightly over one shoulder. Ivy looked out over the water. "You don't owe them belief. You don't owe them closure either." "I know." A beat passed. Then Marge smiled. Not bitter, not triumphant. Just intact. The rain had turned to sleet by the time Marge stepped into Thomas Grant's office for the last time. She shook the water off her umbrella, set it in the stand by the door, and unwrapped her scarf slowly, like someone putting down a weight that no longer needed to be carried. Thomas glanced up from his desk and gave her a brief, satisfied nod. "Everything's ready." Joanne was already seated at the small round table in the corner, a to-go coffee steaming in front of her. "Got the good pen with me," she said, tapping the side of her purse. "The fancy one with the nice glide. Big moments deserve a good ink stroke." Marge smiled and eased down beside her. On the table was a single manila folder, thinner than the trust papers. Cleaner. Final. Thomas slid it toward her. "This is your last will and testament, Marjorie. All previous versions are legally void. The language is ironclad, and your intentions are written exactly as you stated. All that's left is your signature." She didn't hesitate. The pen felt smooth and balanced between her fingers. She signed each page with calm, steady movements, initials here, full name there. With every loop of ink, the air around her grew lighter. When she finished, she closed the pen and folded her hands on the tabletop. "It's done." Thomas nodded, checking the last line. "Joanne, as witness?" "Proudly," she said, and leaned in to sign. Marge didn't even need to ask who the heirs were. She'd gone over it with Thomas already, twice. No fallback clauses, no vague charitable trusts left for interpretation. Everything was named, direct. Joanne would inherit the personal estate, what was left of Marge's savings, her jewelry, family heirlooms that Stephen had never asked about. The Osprey Harbor Inn's community fund would receive the majority of her assets, and a third endowment would go directly to the senior center for programming, transportation, meals, music classes, whatever they needed. Stephen, Carla, Emily, not a mention, not even a symbolic item. They hadn't just lost an inheritance. They'd lost the story they thought they were guaranteed to star in. As they left the office, the clouds split for the first time all day. A clean sliver of pale sunlight stretched across the wet street, making the puddles shimmer like cut glass. Marge stepped off the curb with a calm she couldn't quite explain. Joanne linked arms with her. "You just erased generations of entitlement in about 15 minutes, she said. "How does it feel?" Marge exhaled. "Like I finally did something that won't disappear when I do." They walked the block and a half to the bakery without speaking again. Inside, the smell of cinnamon and brown butter made the windows feel like they were fogged in sugar. Ivy was already there, seated in the corner booth with 2 mugs waiting. She looked up when they entered and smiled. "So?" she said, sliding one of the mugs forward. "What do we toast to today?" Joanne raised hers without hesitation. to freedom, and to chosen family. Marge lifted hers, too. The warmth hit her throat with unexpected sweetness. She didn't say anything at first, just looked out the window at the glistening sidewalk, people bundled in thick coats passing by in no rush. Then she said, "To peace that doesn't ask you to pay for it twice." Later that evening, back at the inn, Ivy knocked gently on her door. "I have something for you," she said. Marge looked up from her notebook. "More flowers?" "Better," Ivy said, and held out a small envelope. Inside was a white plastic keycard, embossed across the top in gold, Bennett Suite, permanent access. Below it, a note handwritten in Ivy's familiar script, "For whenever you need to return. No reservation, no expiration, just home." Marge stared at the card for a long time. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a permission slip for the rest of her life. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Don't," Ivy said gently. "Just come back. That's all." Marge kept the keycard in the zippered pocket of her wallet, not tucked away for safekeeping, but in that particular space she used for things she might need on a quiet day: spare postage stamps, an old movie ticket stub, and now her access to something permanent. Every time she reached for her debit card or her ID, the corner of the key would peek out, white and gold like a whisper, "You're not just welcome here, you belong." She didn't flash it around, not at first. But the next morning, over coffee at the bakery, she pulled it out without thinking and set it beside her mug. Joanne blinked. "Is that what I think it is?" Marge gave a small nod. "Permanent access. Ivy gave it to me last night." Joanne leaned forward, picked it up, turned it over like it might hum with hidden power. "Damn," she said, handing it back. "I've known CEOs with less impressive perks." Marge laughed. It felt good in her throat, unforced, clean. "She said it was for whenever I needed to come back." "Come back?" Joanne scoffed. "You are back. You've been back. This town just took a while to realize it." Word spread fast in a place like Osprey Harbor, not in the gossipy way Marge had feared, but in that quiet, neighborly ripple that made it to doorsteps, mailboxes, and grocery store checkouts without anyone knowing who started it. A florist left an extra bouquet in the lobby with a handwritten card. "Thank you for reminding us what care looks like." A retired nurse stopped Marge on the harbor path just to say, "I heard what you did. Not everyone would have had the guts." And then came the day of the plaque. Ivy didn't make a fuss about it. No balloons, no speeches, no long-winded acknowledgments, just a small gathering in the upstairs hall, those who mattered standing quietly, shoulder to shoulder. Joanne was there, of course, in a deep red scarf and a grin that could have powered the whole inn. So was Thomas, tie slightly crooked, holding a manila folder like he couldn't quite separate his lawyer habits from his human ones. A few neighbors from the senior center came too, Mrs. Patel with her cane wrapped in crocheted yarn, and Gary, who had once beaten Marge 3 games in a row at bingo and never let her forget it. Ivy stood with one hand resting gently against room 203's doorframe. When Marge arrived, she stepped aside and gestured toward the wall. There it was, the Bennett Suite. A space for peace, dignity, and quiet return. This time, Marge didn't cry. She didn't have to. The emotion didn't feel like a storm. It felt like light through curtains. Present, software unavoidable in the best way. Joanne stepped in close and whispered, "You know what I love most about that plaque?" Marge raised an eyebrow. "It doesn't just say who you were, it says who you still are." That evening, after everyone had gone, Marge sat alone in the suite with the door open, listening to the murmur of the inn around her. Distant laughter, the soft clink of plates being cleared downstairs, the creak of old wood settling with the cold. She reached for her wallet, pulled the keycard out again, and held it between her fingers like something sacred. Not because it was fancy, not because it was expensive, but because it could never be taken. Not like birthdays forgotten, not like dinners abandoned, not like the years she'd spent asking herself if she was difficult, too sensitive, not enough. This card didn't unlock a hotel room. It unlocked the truth of her worth. She slipped it under her pillow that night, like a child might with a lost tooth, only this time, what she was leaving behind wasn't innocence. It was doubt. The next morning, Ivy knocked on her door with a cup of strong coffee and a smile. "You've got a visitor," she said. "She says she just wants a minute. Said she won't make a scene." Marge looked up, her fingers still curled around the mug Ivy handed her. "Who is it?" Ivy hesitated. "Carla." Marge didn't flinch, but she didn't stand up either. "Did she say why she came?" Ivy shook her head. "Number, but I told her she'd have to wait in the garden, out back, in the cold." Marge stared at the door for a long moment, then reached for her wallet. She slipped the key card into her pocket and said, "Let her wait." The fire crackled softly in the Bennett suite, casting amber light across the wood-paneled walls and the thick quilt draped over Marge's lap. Her tea had gone cold, but she didn't mind. The room didn't ask anything of her. It simply held space. Outside the window, snow had begun its quiet descent again, thicker now, but still graceful, the kind that turned the world hushed without making it feel heavy, a soft hush that allowed thoughts to settle without rushing to solve themselves. Marge leaned back in the armchair closest to the hearth. Her slippers warmed on the brick ledge. Her notebook lay open in her lap, pen resting across the spine, untouched. She didn't need to write anything down tonight. Some truths didn't require ink. A knock, then a familiar voice. "Permission to enter the Queen's chambers?" Joanne stepped in without waiting for an answer, holding 2 glasses of red wine with a mischievous tilt to her grin. "I figured it was time for a toast," she said, "to surviving, well, everything." Marge took the glass. "Is this the good kind?" Joanne shrugged. "Let's just say it didn't come with a twist-off cap." They clinked gently, and Marge took a sip. It was bold and dark with a trace of cherry, the kind of wine that asked you to be still while it bloomed. They didn't speak for a while. The silence between them had grown rich over the past weeks, not empty, not waiting, just full of the kind of understanding that no longer needed performance. Then another knock. This time, Ivy entered carrying a tray covered in a folded linen napkin and the unmistakable scent of vanilla and brown sugar. "Emergency dessert delivery," she said. "No one should end a snow day without something caramelized." She revealed a trio of small ramekins, warm bread pudding crowned with soft whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon. It was the kind of indulgence that didn't shout, just melted. Joanne practically swooned. "This sweet should come with a Michelin star." Ivy settled on the edge of the armchair opposite, tucking one foot beneath her. "I just thought it might be nice for tonight to feel like something." "It already does," Marge said, her voice quiet but clear. Laughter bubbled up between bites, stories about awful exes, bizarre church bake sales, Joanne's failed attempt to learn ukulele during the pandemic. For a brief moment, Marge felt like a teenager at a slumber party, safe, warm, surrounded by people who didn't need her to prove anything. The fire danced lower now, glowing more than burning. Ivy yawned softly and stood, gathering the empty ramekins. "I'll leave you two to solve the world," she said, pressing a soft hand to Marge's shoulder as she passed. "Or at least finish the wine." When the door clicked shut behind her, Joanne leaned back and looked at Marge with a small smile. "You seem different tonight, like something clicked into place." Marge nodded. "I stopped wondering if I did the right thing." "And started knowing?" "No," she said. "I started feeling it. In my bones. In my breath. I'm not angry. I'm not afraid. I'm just me. And I don't need their applause to know I'm whole." Joanne raised her glass again. "To being whole." Marge clinked hers gently. "To choosing it." They sat a while longer, watching snow gather on the sill, until Joanne eventually slipped out with a sleepy goodnight. Marge remained in her chair, legs tucked beneath her, robe wrapped tight around her shoulders. The fire had faded to embers, flickering soft and low. She reached for her notebook, not to write, but to hold. She looked around the suite, her suite, the plaque outside, the framed harbor photo by the dresser, the key card on the nightstand. Symbols, yes, but not of wealth or control. Symbols of return, of ownership without possession, of presence, after all those years of being invisible. Outside, the harbor blinked with lights in the distance. The world, wide and quiet and waiting. And as she settled into sleep, the final thought drifted across her mind, warm and sure as the fire. The best doors aren't opened for you. They're the ones you unlock yourself.